Mm-hmm.
We okay?
We will be.
Okay.
My battery is not.
Just to try and get my mom going. When you stop working, all of a sudden there's this time, and so that when you were doing it every day almost, that time was a little easier.
And the funniest part about it, before I quit work, I always said, I'll never volunteer. I may go get me a part-time job.
Mm-hmm.
And then I didn't get a part-time job. And one winter at home, I said, this was it.
Yeah.
Then I had to get out. Even though in the evenings, I had other things to do, like my church and an organization.
Mm-hmm.
But during the day, looking at the four walls wasn't for me.
Yeah. Well, especially when you work on it.
Uh-huh.
I'm ready to go anytime.
Okay. Okay. So.
If I needed to do something over, I'll just stop and say it.
Okay. So you can get it running and we'll get going. Well, Mrs. Fleming, we have lots of interest in Ernie, from kids who are wee small to those of us who are up in our years. But one thing several people have asked is he was such a big guy. How big was he as a baby? How was he a huge baby?
Oh, 7 pounds, 3 ounces.
Oh, 7 pounds. So he wasn't a real huge baby, but a good size.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you. How about as an eater, as a little kid? Did he have a healthy appetite?
Not as a small kid. Probably an average eater.
Mm-hmm.
But then when he got to be a teenager, that's when there was a change.
And tell me a little bit about that. What was he like as a teenage eater?
Oh, he just liked food. And there was very few things that he didn't like. And right off the top of my head, I can't remember.
Well, how about some favorites? Did he have a favorite dessert or?
Well, I think he liked all desserts, but I think his favorite was apple pie.
Apple pie. Okay. And did he ever do any cooking? Did he cook for himself?
Well, due to the fact that I worked all the time, some mornings, well, most mornings during the summer, he had to get his breakfast, and he knew how to fry eggs, but most of the time it was just cereal,
Okay.
just fried bacon and eggs and things like that.
Okay.
But any other cooking, I don't know.
Okay. And when we know that when he was little, he was with you for a while, and then he went to live with your parents?
My parents,
Could you
yes.
tell me a little bit about that?
Well,
How old he was?
his, as I have mentioned before, his father was killed, and he didn't know his father. And so I had to go away to work, which I went into Pittsburgh to work, which is about 40-some miles from my home. And so therefore, I had to leave him with my mother and father. And they raised him until he was in the 6th grade.
Mm-hmm.
Then he came to live with me.
And tell us a little bit what your parents were like as far as how they shaped you and Ernie and all the kids in between.
Well, my parents was very strict, and they had certain values that we all had to adhere by, and we just did it, I guess, one after the other. We just did what our parents asked of us.
No back talk.
No. And one thing was, to stay in school and go to church, and that was things that we were taught. Then, after a while, as the younger ones seen what the older ones was doing, and so it was a continuous thing, and we didn't have to be reminded of that.
It was just understood
Mm-hmm.
that you would go to school and you would go to church. Now, what about Ernie's relationship with, it would be your younger brothers and sisters? I
Yes,
Yeah,
he grew up with them.
okay. And was he particularly close to some of them? Or?
He was particularly close to my brother. We call him Chuck.
Chuck.
And my sister Angie. And I think he confided in them more than anybody else.
I bet. Because how close was he in age to those?
Now, let's see. Chuck, I can't tell you exactly, but I think Chuck was about 5 years older than, and Angie was probably 6 years older than Ernie.
Okay. Seems to me, I remember you telling a story about Ernie and Chuck, and maybe it had to do with the Boy Scouts, some outing.
Oh, I think somebody else told that one.
Oh, really?
Now,
Oh,
let's see.
okay.
Now, wait a minute.
It was, I thought, well, I'll look that up and I'll get back to you on that one. I'll check that one out. Actually, could
The
we
Boy
start-
Scouts?
Yeah, let me look, because maybe
Sure,
I'm,
I'll stop here for a second.
yeah, why don't we do that? That's a great thing. We can go. Oh, you can just roll it, you can just, that's great. You can cut out when I mess up. Okay. You mentioned that, your parents instilled in you children and Ernie, the importance of school. And I thought that I heard a story that Chuck was a little different about going to school than
Oh,
Ernie.
yes, I told that one.
Okay, let me hear that one.
Well, at that time, by Chuck being the youngest one, he was a bit spoiled, which all the children that my parents had, how could he be spoiled? But to an extent he was. And if he would insist on something, he was nothing like Ernie. And if you tell Ernie no, he would go on his merry way. But Chuck, he's going to beg and plead and cry. And they both went out to school together. And Chuck was there trying to persuade my mother to let him do whatever he wanted to do. And Ernie would be waiting for him. And the mother would tell him, Ernie, you go on to school. We don't want you to be late. So he'd go out the door, but he'd wait outside until Chuck came out.
Okay. So he'd obey, and he would obey your grandmother, and he'd leave, but then he'd wait, because Chuck was still doing his argument or whatever, his play. Okay. And did he start with his sports pretty much playing with the brothers and sisters, your brothers and sisters, back when he was raised with both?
Yes, he always, because my brothers, they were are and still is athletic. And he would want to play with them. But you know how they don't want a younger one playing, and he was smaller than them. But when he began to grow and he was growing taller than they were, they accepted him. And so he got into that, in the sandlot, playing sandlot things and playing pickup teams with my brothers and their friends. So that's how he really got into it.
He got into sports that way. You mentioned earlier that when he was around 6th grade, then he stopped living with your folks and he came to live with you.
At the end of his 6th grade, because he started in 7th grade here in Elmira.
Okay. And how was that when he had to leave where he had grown up and then come and live with you?
It was quite sad and touching for him, me too, because he didn't want to leave his grandparents. And I hated to see him, feeling that way, and still I wanted him to come with me. So finally when we left and we said the last goodbye, tears are just flowing, and you can imagine how I felt. And so then after we got to Elmira, well, during the summer, there isn't much of anything going on if you don't find friends if you don't have any friends. But Buzzy Starks lived next door. And Buzzy tried to get him to go out during the summer, to go to the neighborhood house, to go wherever they was shooting hoops or playing baseball, but he didn't want to go. Once in a while, Buzzy would get him to go. But most all the summer, he stayed right there around the house, sitting on the porch.
Sitting on the porch, and would be right on Lake Street.
Yes.
Across from the Ernie Davis Middle School, what is now Gifford.
Yes.
So he spent his summer that way.
Toward the end of the summer, then he began to meet along with Buzzy. Buzzy began to introduce him to some of the other kids their age, and he began to go out a little. But then after school started, and he got involved in sports, you know, in school, the small fry and what have you, then he seemed to have been all right.
So he made that transition once school started in the sports.
Yeah.
Sports involved. Yeah. We hear about the goodness that seemed to be just a real big part of Ernie, and you hear it from anybody who ever met him. And when he was little, did the goodness show all the time? Was he not a problem at all as a kid, and did that goodness just shine?
Yes, I would say so. He was always considerate of more considerate of other people than he was himself, and he could always see some goodness in the worst person.
So he could see goodness in others.
He didn't like for you to, you know, say anything bad about anybody. He didn't, and he didn't want anybody else to either.
Okay, so he would kind of let people know that he'd rather hear the good.
Oh, it don't have to be that way. Or how do you know he did or said that? Something like that.
Yeah, softly, but kind of getting people away from that. Yeah. Now, was he? I've read that some of his roommates in college mentioned that he prayed. Even during college, he would get down on his knees and pray. Did he, as a child? Was that part of his routine?
Yes, we were all brought up to say our prayers, you know, at night before we went to bed. And he was brought up that way, but when his roommates was telling me that he was still doing it in college, I was really glad to hear that. And there was two things that he did like. He liked school, and he liked to go to church.
Which is, that's amazing. And that was true even when he was a little boy? Yeah.
Never wanted to miss school. Well, I guess he only missed school. He wasn't a sickly child either. I guess he broke his wrist one time playing football, basketball, or something out. Not in school, out.
Oh, really? And that was about the only time you can remember as being sick. Did he ever do anything naughty? It seems like he was such a good child. Did he ever do anything a little bit naughty?
Well, I guess my mother probably could tell you a few things, but if he did, it was very few. And nobody can believe that he was ever sent home from school and told not to come back until his parents came with him. All because it was a misunderstanding. The teacher saw him throw an eraser back. Somebody had thrown it in his direction. He wasn't even involved. They weren't throwing it at him. And what she saw was him pick up the eraser and throw it back. And that's when she told him to go to the principal's office, and they told him.
And that was the only time that you can remember that he ever did anything that, and that wasn't really naughty, it was a misunderstanding. Yeah, okay. That's amazing. As a mother, I think that's amazing.
Now, a lot of people would hear these stories and wouldn't believe it, but that is the type of kid he was.
That is what I hear. In fact, people have said that he kind of elevated other people. Like if kids would hang around with Ernie, and their character would become better. Did you see that?
I think that's a right assumption.
Yeah. And did he ever get discouraged about schoolwork or about sports as far as you could see as his mom?
Yeah. No, I don't think so. Because he was really wrapped up in sports.
Mhm.
Whether it was football, basketball, baseball, or whatever.
Mhm.
And if he was discouraged, because he would come home. If we didn't go to the game, if the game was out of town, we'd say, and they lost. Oh, we lost. He didn't even want to talk about it.
Oh, okay. So it was just quiet, we lost, and that.
And if they won, it was the same thing.
Really?
Yes.
So he didn't brag. Yeah. Yeah.
Say, who won, Ernie? Oh, we did.
That was it.
Just about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, I'm sure that, with his, the other fellows, that they probably discussed the sports and things, among themselves.
Mm-hmm. But it wasn't something he came home and reported to you. Was he the kind of kid that were kids calling for him all the time on the telephone and coming to the house a lot? Was it like that during his years in Elmira?
Well, there was always somebody to the house because, as I said, we lived on Lake Street. If they'd be going by, if he was out there, definitely they were going to stop.
Mm-hmm.
If he wasn't there, they'd come up or yell, Ernie, Ernie, or come to the door and ring the doorbell, or wait there on the porch, hoping that he would come out.
Mm-hmm.
But then after he went to college, and he would come home on breaks or come home for weekends, if they knew he was home, there was no peace. So
Really?
most of the time, I would answer, and he'd say, tell them I'm not here. For a while, after he got tired of answering the phone, or if he's trying to get dressed to get out or something.
Right. And were these both close friends and then just acquaintances? Was that the kind of?
They were close. They were guys that he had played sports with,
Mm-hmm.
people that he had became acquainted with,
Mm-hmm.
people that knew him.
Yeah. And they'd just be, if he was in town, they were there.
Somehow or other, they'd find out him.
Yeah. Yes. He didn't get that rest that you're supposed to get when you come home from college. Yeah. Now, a couple of people have said that he was a very well-dressed young man, and he'd put something on and it would look great on him. What was he kind of interested in clothes and his appearance?
Yes, he was. He was quite interested in, and I think, by him being the only child, he did dress a little better than some of his friends, because, as I said, by him being the only child, well, we could afford to give him a little more.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And then, didn't he have a job that had to do with clothes during part of the high school?
Oh, yes, he worked at Morel's, and he worked at, not Morel's.
Is it Jerome's?
Jerome's.
Yeah, Jerome's, right.
And then he worked at a shoe store, but I can't remember the name of the shoe store.
And so he worked during high school at the stores.
And during his college, he worked for the post office.
So when he was home on break, he often went to work then, it sounds like. How was he about his room, if he had all these clothes? Did he keep a neat room? What kind of a...
Well, yes, because that was a must in our house.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he knew if he was getting dressed and threw things around, that when he came back home the next day or something, he had to hang those clothes up or put them where they belong.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether I told the story once. For some reason or other, I had to go to his dorm. And you know how the closet space in dorms are.
Mm-hmm.
And here he had piles of clothes laying all around the room, folded up, and piles laying around the room because he didn't have enough drawer and closet space.
But yet, these were neat piles. Wow. That's a rare thing, I think. Did he stay friends with some of the folks that were his friends when he first came? Did he, even though he went off to Syracuse and was a big All-American, did he keep in touch with the folks?
He stayed friends with the ones that he met
Mm-hmm.
here in Elmira,
Mm-hmm.
and he stayed friends with friends that he met in college.
Right.
And there's a few of them that went to college with him that keep in touch with me.
And who are some of those?
John Mackey,
Mm-hmm.
John Brown, well, Jack Moore, as you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Aidan Galpin.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I said Jim Brown, which he was a little ahead of him.
Jim Brown and John Brown.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And there was a couple that was on that winning team that year. I don't hear from them much anymore, but once in a while I'll get a Christmas card from them. Right now it won't come to me.
Yeah, that's neat. Do you mean that basketball team?
No,
Or do you mean
the football team at Syracuse.
Okay, okay. So, do these fellows from college, the college days, when do you see them? Do they have a special name for you or anything?
Well, not really, other than like John Brown, John Mackey, and Jim Brown. They always, and he was after Ernie.
Maybe
Floyd Little.
Floyd Little?
Floyd said, "You remember, I'm part of the family too. We're all Syracuse."
Mm-hmm.
And the others say, "I'm your other sons."
Oh, so they think of you as a mom, which shows they thought of her as a brother. Yeah.
And whenever I hear from John Mackey and he writes, he'll say, "Your other son."
Oh, really? Wow. Wow. That's how he signs his letters. Your other son. Wow. Do you know his family?
I met his family at their wedding, John Mackey's wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think I've seen them since. I've seen one of his brothers since then,
Mm-hmm.
but I haven't seen the rest of his family. But John and his wife and family, they keep in touch.
Mm-hmm.
And John Brown
Mm-hmm.
in Pittsburgh,
Mm-hmm.
one of his sons is our godchild, so we keep close touch with each other.
Oh, that's wonderful. And is this boy named after Ernie?
Yes.
Yeah. What's his full name?
Ernest Davis Brown.
Okay. So he's totally, and he's I didn't realize he was your godchild too.
Actually, I kind of like to get that one again, and not to
Okay.
not to try to tell you how to talk.
Mhm.
When we put this together, I kind of like to have that as one long kind of streak where we could edit that into something without prompting for the name or anything like that.
Okay.
If I could just have you tell the story again, that'd be great.
The story about John Brown
Yes.
without my
Yes.
voice.
Right.
John Brown.
Right.
That'd be great.
And his child.
His child.
Okay.
His son.
Okay.
Well, the John Brown and his family keep in touch because Ernie, one of their sons, is named after Ernie. His name is Ernest Davis Brown, and we're his godchild, godparents.
How old is that boy in his teens now? Or?
No, he graduated. This is 2 years he'd been with the Canadian League. And they're living in Scottsdale, Arizona now. His wife got a job between seasons, football season in Scottsdale, so that's where they're living right now.
Wow. The difficulties that sometimes parents have with teenagers, I'm getting the idea you didn't have those difficulties with Ernie. No back talk, nothing like that, as far as you.
Well, now there was one thing that that I had made up my mind. I wasn't going to raise Ernie like, now he couldn't do this with his grandparents, but with me, I wanted to hear his side of the story. I always wanted him to tell me, I don't care what anybody said, I wanted his story. And I always give him the opportunity to express himself.
And that's different from the way your parents. Okay. Do you think that had something to do with Ernie's character then, the fact that you always listened to his side?
I don't know. I just had, I always said, see, because whatever, you didn't experience this, I know, but whatever the parents said back then, that was law and order. But I always said if I had any children, it wouldn't be that way with me.
So you listened, you were interested in the child's viewpoint, or Ernie's viewpoint, and he was heard. Yeah. Was he that way then when he dealt with other people? Did he have that ability to, or that interest in listening to all the sides of the story? There was a problem.
I guess so.
You wouldn't know.
Not really.
Nothing, because he didn't come home and tell you about himself.
No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Okay. He wasn't that kind of guy. Several people have said that, Jack Moore is one, that he never met a person better than Ernie Davis. And I read that the coach at Syracuse, Ben
Schwartzwalder,
said he never met a better kid in all his years of coaching. Did you hear that from lots of different people? And tell me about that. It seems.
Well, I mean, since his passing, I'm hearing more of it. Because you see, before they would say Ernie's great, Ernie's all right. Well, I mean, he was a good athlete, and they were saying that he was good. But then, after he passed, then I've been hearing what a great guy he was, what a good person he was. Those are the kind of things that I've been hearing, you know, after his passing.
Did you? I think you told a story to me before about a woman who wrote you a letter, and she had been in a room, maybe a cafeteria at Syracuse. Could you tell me that, please?
I don't remember her name, but she said she was in the cafeteria that day, and you know how guys can get sort of rough and swearing and all that. And Ernie got their attention and said, you shouldn't be doing that. Don't you see ladies in the... And said she never forgot that.
And she wrote you
a letter telling me about it. Well, you know Ernie didn't tell me about it.
No, he just didn't. Did he have, other than sports, did he have any activities that he enjoyed as a child, other than sports?
No, because my family was a sport-oriented family, and so other than school and church, sports was the other.
And what church did he go to?
We are Baptists, and he always went to a Baptist church. But I understand that if they were on the road sometime and was somewhere on a Sunday, if he felt like, he would go to any church or whatever. If somebody said, let's go to church, he would go to church with them.
To anybody's church. That's interesting. I thought there was a story about he delivered mail for a while. Was that during college that he?
Here in Elmira, while he was I think it was his first year in college. He got a job at the post office on his Christmas break.
Oh, Christmas break. Is that how the Elmira Express nickname came about?
I don't know. Al Millett is the one that gave him that title. So you'll have to get that from...
I'm going to change tapes now.
Okay. Is a different one?
At least one of my nephews sent me one. I don't know whether they have an Elmira school system or not. He sent me one from California.
Really?
Yeah.
I'll ask her.
Actually, I do have some things that it's kind of fun because we're not saying exactly what we said last time. I'm kind of learning some new stuff here. What have we just talked about?
You were talking about how he got the nickname.
Oh, right. Okay.
And the post office.
And working for the, yeah.
Well, he was working during, Christmas break for the post office.
Was he motivated to work because he wanted to become independent? Did he just feel it was his job to have a job when he could?
I told you that he worked on construction because he was told that he would build up his muscles. And his first 2 years in college, I think he did construction work.
Did he do that construction work where?
Here in Elmira.
Did it build him up?
Well, I guess it helped.
So he was work-oriented. Even as a little boy, how was he about chores around the home?
Oh, my mother would always refer to him as my little helper. When nobody else was around to do, she said Ernie was there.
So he would do, even if Chuck was off.
They're off somewhere, even the girls or whatever.
He would do it. Yeah. Well, now, he sounds almost too good to be true. Did he have ways of dealing with you that would kind of get you to do things that he wanted you to do, or was he not that kind of a child, not manipulative at all?
Well, I'll have to tell you this story that happened. I didn't hear it, but one of my brothers told me, because I didn't want him to be spoiled. If he'd ask for something like, I want this or I want that, I'd say, we'll see. And he would tell me why he wanted it and all that. And I said, well, I told you we'll see. So my brother said he told him, don't worry about it. She'll get it for me. But if I said no, he didn't pout. He just went on his merry way.
But he knew.
Most of the time he got it. Not all the time, but most of the time.
Do you remember, as far as school goes, his being interested, this is a long time ago, I realize, but was there any particular subject or any school project that he got a little bit involved in or interested in? History or science?
Not really, because it was sports, and he had to buckle down in order to get good grades. It didn't come to him easy.
Okay.
He had to buckle down in order to maintain the grades that he needed.
Okay, so he worked hard he earned the grades that he got.
Now, he couldn't be like some of the kids now, like one, for instance, Ted DeFilippo. Now, he could didn't have to cram for no test, but Ernie would have to cram.
And he did it.
Yeah.
And he did it.
Yeah.
Okay, gotta change battery now.
Oh.
Okay, we're ready.
So you worked for his grades too?
Oh, yes, he had to study. He wasn't one of those that he could read through it and or remember it or read it in a hurry. He had to study. In exams, he really had to cram.
Did he do this studying at home or at the library, or where did he go when he did
Well, he was always going to the library his junior and senior year, mostly his senior year. And who used to study with him? Oh, Betty was one year, in his junior year, Betty would study with him. But then his senior year, he didn't have anybody to study with him.
He studied on his own. And what about in college with his studies?
Well, as I said, he was from the day one, he was into sports, and with all that, he had to have a tutor all the way through.
All the athletes had tutors during college.
Most of them.
Yeah.
Maybe there was a few that didn't need them.
Yeah. And he worked. He worked for what he got.
Yes.
Yeah. You mentioned that it didn't come easy, studies, so he worked at it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, athletics came easy, but he still worked at it, didn't he?
Because he had to, you have to practice whatever the coach say you have to do. You have to do that, to stay on the team. If there's a 11 o'clock meeting, you have to go to that. If there's a 6 o'clock practice, you have to be there.
And he always was. I heard that
So he was never late for training table or practice.
I heard that he practiced even when more than the coaches asked him to do. Is that?
Well, that's how a lot of the younger kids knew him. I don't know whether you were in Elmira when old Parker Field was over there, when they played at Parker Field.
Mm-hmm.
He would be up there early morning, late evenings, practicing, running around the track or doing something. And he'd have quite an audience of the young kids.
The kids would come and watch him train. Was this during high school or college?
High school.
During high school. And he had a following even in high school, like fans that were.
I think it was because of that basketball team, that basketball team, then right from basketball to football.
Right. So he would work out alone. I mean, other people weren't at Parker Field at the time?
No, this was in between their regular practice. He'd be out there doing things.
And kids would come and watch. Yeah. How did he treat younger kids? That's, he was a celebrity really in high school. How did he deal with younger kids as far as that goes?
Well, he seemed to have always been interested in younger kids. I don't know whether you've heard the story. Although he wasn't any younger than this kid because they were playing small fry, but small fry football. But I guess he tackled this kid, a little kid. Then he picks him up after he had tackled him because he was towering. He was so much taller than most of them on the team his age. But he said they said he tackled this kid. Then he went over and picked him up. And now, since you said that, on me looking through the pictures last night, I seen where he visited, I don't know what hospital it was. They would go, the Shriners Hospital. And there is a picture with him, with the kids, and him holding one of the younger kids.
When he was in college, maybe?
And they went, where were they? The Shriners Hospital's in Florida, I think. Well, wherever. Anyway, they played the Shrine game there.
Okay.
Wherever they played the Shrine game. And then he and others went to visit the Shriners Hospital. And there's a picture with him holding some youngster.
Oh. So when he was a youngster, he was kind to smaller children, and then as he got older, he still kept that concern. Yeah. Regarding church, I was wondering, did he take an active part in Sunday school or music parts of church, that kind of thing, or no?
No, he just went to Sunday school and the classes and to church, but he never took part in, the choir or teaching. Well, I mean, when he was old enough to teach, he was in college, so involved in sports, he didn't have time for that.
That would make sense. Now I have something from chatting with you before about the Royal Dairy. Did he work there, or did he? What's
The Royal Dairy was up the street in the next block from our house, across from the middle school now. And that was a hangout for the kids at school, after school.
So that's where he would go to socialize.
Was it the Royal Dairy? Yes, it was Royal Dairy. Yes, it was the Royal Dairy, you know, so many years ago.
Right.
That was a hangout for the kids, the Royal Dairy.
Okay. And the neighborhood house, too.
Yes, the neighborhood house was around the corner.
I know that we can,
That's fine.
This is, this is an interesting story, that you told me when we chatted before. You told me a story, Mrs. Fleming, that John Mackey told you, and it had something to do with a hamburger. Could you tell me that story?
Yes, I've heard John Mackey tell this story at several, I knew nothing about it until I heard it at several events that he was a speaker. And he said, well, you know how money was short for them in college, and he had got enough money somehow or other to buy him a hamburger and a milkshake. And for some reason, this bully came along and wanted to take it from him. And I guess he was hungry, so he wasn't going to give up his hamburger. And so this kid took his hamburger and just squished it in his hand. So I guess he let him have it. And when the faculty found out, they was going to suspend him, which they did suspend him. So while he's packing his clothes, getting ready to leave, Ernie comes in the room. Said, what are you doing? He said, I've been suspended. So he told him the story, and said, Ernie started packing and said, I'm going too. So the word got back to Coach Schwartzwalder. So he came over to their dorm, and he talked with them. He found out, John told him the story. So he goes back to the chancellor or whoever, somebody, and so they let John Mackey stay. But Ernie was packing, and John said was going to leave. If he left, he was going to leave too.
Mm-hmm. And so was that because, you think that was loyalty to John for a sense of injustice that Ernie had? I know you weren't there at the time, but can you guess what prompted Ernie to do that?
I would, I think it was a little of both. His loyalty to John, and he felt that it wasn't right what the kid did. But as I told you before, I don't think we'll ever know, but now that's what I would think it would be, a little of both.
Yeah. And would Ernie, was he the kind of young man who would have realized that if he had left, that his life, would have, some chances would have gone away from him? Would he have known the seriousness of that packing, do you think, if he had left?
Well, truthfully, I think at that particular moment, probably if he had had more time to think about it, but at that moment, if for that reason that John Mackey was going to leave, he was going to leave also.
Because of those other reasons of loyalty.
So if you talk with John Mackey, you ask him, because as I said, I never heard the story until he told it at couple of the affairs that he was on the dais and spoke.
Did you go to New York when Ernie was given the Heisman? Were you there at
Yes.
the time? Could you tell a little bit we didn't talk about that before, but could you tell a little bit about that? I can't imagine what that would be like.
Well, I think I was more excited at home because the way the people in Elmira turned out and talking and all carried on and naming streets after him. And then by the time we got to New York, which was 2 or 3 weeks later, it was nice. It was touching and all that. But I think all glamour, we had left it in Elmira. But it was very nice, and it was interesting, and it was quite an honor. And I have to tell you this, after we were there most of the evening, and it was, I guess, nearing midnight by that time. So Ernie comes over and says to my father, "Are you ready to go?" And my dad said yes. He said, "Let's go back over the house." Now see, that's where we call it. And here, the limousine took he and I over to my father's house, which they live in Brooklyn, and the rest of the family was in cars. So we went over there and finished celebrating the rest of that night. But he wanted to get away from the fanfare and wanted to go with his family, so that's what we did.
With his family, on really practically the biggest night of his life. Yeah.
Well, now see, he had been there the night before. They had something for him. All day long, there was something going on. Then at 6 o'clock, I think it was the presentation, and then there was a dinner. Now, as I said, about 11 or 12 o'clock, people had begun to leave anyway, but...
But he went with the family, and you continued to celebrate as a family. Now, I didn't realize that your dad was there for this. Yeah. So that was pretty meaningful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Chuck was...
Oh, yes, most of my family. Even the nephew from California was there. Well, this was a special thing. But as I said, there was so much celebration that night in Elmira. At first, they couldn't find me. But I had a second job, and that's why they couldn't find me. I was doing my job, had gone, and somebody got a hold of Tony. Tony knew the office that I was cleaning, so he sent them over there.
Oh, wow.
I can't remember somebody from the Star Gazette asked me if I knew it. No. That was shortly after it was announced on TV, radio, whatever. That, well, you know how the papers and radio stations get on it. And they're trying to find me.
So the paper called you, really, the media contacted you before Ernie did?
Yes, because Ernie was not in Syracuse. I can't remember where he was. I believe he was in Washington. He wasn't in Syracuse when the final announcement was made.
Did he?
I mean, although I think he knew it, while he was in Washington for something else.
Okay, when the announcement came. I've read about his meeting the president. What did he tell you about that?
Well, now, we were supposed to do something. I can't remember what that afternoon. As I said, he was busy all that day. And he was supposed to have a press conference with somebody else that day. And the word got there that the president wanted a meeting. So here they go over there once. And because of the traffic and what have you there in the city, he didn't make it. The president insisted that he wanted to see him, so they went the second time. And the second time that he got to meet the president. He was really elated, talked about it, and said, "Oh, I don't know whether I'm going to wash my hand again." I shook the hand of the president. He really was happy to have been able to meet the president.
Sure. Yeah. That's exciting. I wondered, do you think that Ernie would have been, had he lived, was he at all interested in politics?
Doubtful.
Doubtful.
Never thought about politics.
No.
I often wondered. I wonder, what would he have been doing now? And how many grandchildren would I have had?
Yeah, of course. Of course you think that. What about his, you mentioned nieces and nephews, from your nieces and nephews.
Mm-hmm.
Was Ernie close with these children?
Oh, yes. We were were and are a very close-knit family. Even though it was a large family, we're still the immediate family, you know, like the nieces, but now aunts and uncles and like that, we weren't.
Well, there were 12
12 of us.
children plus Ernie.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big group.
Mm-hmm.
This is what Rich just brought me. He just showed me.
Oh, yes.
You know, this.
Oh, there's a lot of those of these around.
Yeah. He just showed me that one. Yeah. Well, I guess I can ask you this. Excuse me. Other than saying, I don't know if I'll wash this hand, did Ernie have did he say anything that the president said to him, or was it more just the elation that you mentioned?
It was more of that. All he said that he congratulated him on his accomplishment and talked a little about his football days, and you know, I guess it was only a few minutes that they met. But Ernie didn't talk too much about it, you know, other than that.
So President Kennedy spoke a little bit about his own football days, and then he was congratulating Ernie on his, I was asking in the faculty room today, I bragged that I was going to come speak with you, and I asked a couple people, did they have anything they would ask you if they could, and actually one person in the room wondered about religion. That was one reason I was asking you about Ernie and religion, and she also wondered this, is there any advice or that you would give young folks in Elmira today who are gifted athletes? Any advice or anything you'd want to say to some of the good athletes in Elmira today, or that maybe Ernie might want to say to them?
I think he would say, like is being said by anybody that speak of the young people of today, get an education and, you know, such things as that. I think that would be the main thing, is stay in school and try to get an education.
Thank you very much. Is there anything that you'd like me to ask?
I think you covered quite a bit.
I think we did. Actually,
I've got a couple of minutes.
Yeah, well, go ahead.
I've been really looking forward to this.
Yes.
I didn't grow up in Elmira.
Oh, you didn't?
Yeah, I did.
Good.
I didn't grow up in Elmira. I grew up in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
I never heard of Ernie Davis until I came here. I've lived here for almost 12 years now. I have never heard one person ever say one negative thing about it. Ever. I mean, as a parent, you must be incredibly proud of him.
Oh, I am. And I think more so than when he was participating in sports. Now, it's 30-odd years, and they're still trying to keep his memory alive. Not trying, they are keeping his memory alive and saying not a great athlete, but what a wonderful person. And that's really says something.
I think it really does. It's just amazing. And we talked about this before.
Yes,
It's just absolutely remarkable to me. That's what I wanted. I just wanted to talk about it. And to have that kind of a legacy is just incredible. I mean, here's a kid who just a really good ball player, really likes sports, and here he is meeting the President of the United States. I'm just amazed by it. I'm so impressed. But the fact that he was such a good person is what makes an impression on me. That But that's what people talk about first,
Yes.
and then they talk about his athletic ability.
Yeah. And that's why Floyd Little and John Mackey and John Brown and Jim Brown say they're your sons. It's not, I mean, it's not because of the way Ernie played ball, although it's because of who he was, and because of who you are.
And I remember one time, it was here in Elmira. They were having that, which is coming up soon, June, whatever it is. Can't think of the title of it. Anyway, Jim Brown was here first. Then John Mackey, they was a little, sort of iffy about him. So when we were ready to sit down to lunch, and Jim Brown came over and said to me, now the rest of your family's here, talking about John Mackey after he had met.
That's just an amazing devotion, I think it really is. And you know, I don't know if I said this to you, Mrs. Fleming, but when I said to Jack Moore once, you know, did this guy really walk on water? And
you know, sometimes when people are talking about him, I'm thinking in the back of my mind, are they talking about my son? So seems as if they're talking about somebody, I don't know who. Like you say, somebody that may have walked on water. Because all of the nice things, positive things, you know, they have to say about him. Which I think he was the greatest. And he was nothing like my sisters and brothers and nieces that I have seen. He was a different, although we were raised by the same parents, raised under the same standards, but he was a little different.
From right from the beginning, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. How about, did he cry much as a baby?
Well, I guess probably I thought so for the first few months. But all in all, he was a pretty good child. Baby and youngster.
How about, did he go through terrible twos?
Well, I imagine he did.
Maybe for Ernie they were just the same.
Well, see, at that time, he was, and so my mother was in charge of them. Well, now with the other children, she had, by that time, 10 of us were, because I have one brother younger than Ernie. 9 of us she had raised, so I guess she knew what to do for him.
Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
I didn't realize there was one younger than
Yes, but he's not with us anymore. He was killed by a hit-and-run driver.
Oh, dear.
Oh, I mean, he was grown. It wasn't when he was young. He was grown.
Okay.
And he hadn't been married too long.
Yeah. We okay?
We will be.
Okay.
And so my brother will not.
Just to try and get my mom going.